You need to leave. This pool is for residents only. I looked up from my book slowly. The voice wasn't confident. It wasn't authoritative. It was entitled. Standing at the edge of the infinity pool was a kid, maybe 19 or 20, wearing designer swim trunks, sunglasses that cost more than my first car, and the kind of smirk you only develop when you've never been told no. Behind him stood his mother, arms crossed, chin lifted, HOA badge clipped to her oversized sun hat like it was a federal credential. And that's when I realized something important. They had absolutely no idea who I was. Let me rewind. 3 months earlier, I finalized the purchase of 14 acres of lakeside property that bordered the gated subdivision known as Silver Ridge Estates. Silver Ridge was the kind of neighborhood that had matching mailboxes, find you for the wrong shade of beige, measured grass height with enthusiasm, and held monthly community harmony meetings. In the center of that neighborhood, a luxury clubhouse and pool overlooking the lake, beautiful view, crystal water, private access gate. What most residents didn't know was this: the land under that pool, it wasn't owned by the HOA, it was leased from me. Back in 1998, the original developer built the clubhouse before transferring operational control to the HOA, but he never transferred the land title. Instead, he structured a 30-year ground lease. When the development company dissolved, the land was sold off separately. Fast forward 2 decades. I bought it. Not just the wooded acreage, not just the shoreline, but the legal parcel that the clubhouse and pool physically sit on. And the lease? It was expiring in 11 months. I wasn't there to cause trouble. I was there to relax. Technically, as the landowner, I had full access rights written into the lease agreement. Clause 7b. Landowner retains non-exclusive recreational access to structures erected upon leased parcel. In plain English, I can use the pool. No HOA membership required. No permission needed. So there I was, reading, drinking iced tea, enjoying property I legally own, until Prince Entitlement showed up. The kid snapped his fingers. "You didn't hear me? This is a private HOA pool." I closed my book calmly. "I know." He blinked. "So leave." I tilted my head slightly. "And you are?" He scoffed like I'd insulted royalty. "My mom runs this community." Ah, there it is. The power by proxy confidence. Behind him, his mother stepped forward, hair perfectly styled, sunglasses lowered dramatically. "I'm Karen Whitmore, HOA president." "Of course you are." She didn't ask who I was. She didn't verify. She didn't inquire. She simply said, "This facility is restricted to HOA members. I'm going to have to ask you to exit immediately." The phrasing was practiced, like she'd rehearsed it in a mirror. I stood up slowly, not aggressively, just enough to match eye level. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said evenly, "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." She smiled thinly. "No, there hasn't." Oh, but there had. Her son had already pulled out his phone, probably filming, because nothing says confidence like documenting your own future embarrassment. "You're trespassing," he said loudly. That word again. Trespassing. It's amazing how casually people use legal terms they don't understand. I reached into my bag, not for a weapon, not for a threat, for paperwork, because real power is documented. I handed her a laminated copy of the relevant lease page, highlighted, neatly tabbed. She glanced at it for maybe 2 seconds before pushing it back toward me. "I don't know what that is." "It's the ground lease for this property." She laughed. "No, it isn't." I nodded calmly. "Yes, it is." Her son chimed in. "Mom, just call security." Security. At a pool sitting on land I own. Bold strategy. Instead of security, she dialed someone else. I heard the words clearly. "Yes, officer, we have a trespasser refusing to leave private HOA property." Interesting choice, because when you involve law enforcement, documentation becomes very important. I stayed exactly where I was, sat back down, crossed one leg over the other, and waited. Her son muttered, "You're about to regret this." I almost smiled. 2 patrol cars pulled into the clubhouse lot. Residents started peeking through blinds. Pool guests pretended not to stare. Karen walked toward the officers with theatrical urgency, pointing at me, gesturing dramatically. I could almost hear the narrative. Stranger, refusing to leave, threatening atmosphere. The officers approached me next. Professional, calm. "What seems to be the issue, sir?" I handed over my ID and the lease copy. "I believe there's confusion about land ownership." One officer skimmed the document, then read it again, then looked at the parcel number. He radioed something back to dispatch. Silence settled around the pool. Karen's confidence flickered. Dispatch responded. The officer looked at me, then at her, then back at me, and asked, "You're the landowner?" "Yes, sir." Pause. "Of this entire parcel?" "Yes." Another pause. "And the clubhouse sits within your deed boundary?" "Yes." Longer silence. Then the officer turned toward Karen. "Ma'am, this appears to be a civil matter." Her face changed. Not dramatically, but subtly, like someone realizing their script just got rewritten. "That's impossible," she said. "We've owned this clubhouse for decades." The officer corrected gently. "The structure may be managed by the HOA, but the land appears to belong to him." And there it was, the sentence that shifted everything. Her son lowered his phone. Slowly, residents had started gathering. Whispers rippled. "Landowner? What does that mean? Wait, we don't own the pool land?" Karen looked at me like I'd betrayed her personally, as if buying property legally was an act of rebellion. "This isn't over," she said quietly. And that's when I knew. She wasn't embarrassed. She was threatened. Because in 11 months, the lease would expire, and she had just publicly tried to remove the person who controlled renewal. I didn't gloat, didn't smirk, didn't escalate. I simply said, "I'm not here to cause issues. I'm here to enjoy property I own." Then I sat back down, opened my book, and resumed reading. The officers left. Karen walked away stiffly. Her son avoided eye contact. The pool atmosphere never fully recovered, but something had changed. The illusion of control had cracked. I hadn't bought the land for leverage. I bought it because it was undervalued. The lease income was decent, and lakefront property appreciates. Simple investment. But the moment she tried to publicly remove me, she turned a passive investment into a strategic opportunity. Because now I was curious. How many residents even knew about the lease? How many believed the HOA owned everything outright? And how would they react if they learned the ground beneath their private luxury amenities was rented? From me. That's how long until renewal. And after today, I wasn't sure renewal was automatic anymore. Not after false police report attempt, public accusation, entitlement theatrics. Respect matters in business. So does tone. And Karen had chosen hers poorly. By the next morning, Silver Ridge Estates was in full panic mode. Not subtle curiosity, not polite confusion, panic. Because word spreads fast in gated communities, especially when it involves police cars and the HOA president being corrected in front of half the neighborhood. And this time, the gossip wasn't about lawn height, it was about ownership. By 9 a.m., the community Facebook group was on fire. Posts started cautiously. "Does anyone know what happened at the pool yesterday?" Then escalated quickly. "Is it true the land under the clubhouse isn't owned by the HOA?" And finally, "Are we renting our own amenities?" Karen tried to shut it down. Comments were deleted. Threads were locked. She posted an official statement. "Silver Ridge amenities remain under full HOA operational control. Residents need not be concerned." That would have worked if the police hadn't been there, and if I hadn't already received 5 emails from homeowners asking for clarification. Here's what Karen didn't expect. When people sense instability in property ownership, they don't get emotional. They get analytical, especially in neighborhoods where homes average 7 figures. The emails I received were calm, polite, professional. "Hi, We heard you may own the clubhouse parcel. Would you be willing to clarify? I responded the same way. No drama, no insults, just documents, parcel map, recorded deed, lease summary, highlighted expiration date, 11 months. There was one clause in that lease Karen absolutely hated once she reread it. Clause 12A. At lease termination, landowner retains full discretion to renew, renegotiate, or reclaim parcel without obligation. In plain English, I didn't have to renew at all. And if I chose not to, the structure legally reverts to the landowner unless otherwise negotiated, which meant that beautiful clubhouse, that infinity pool, that residents-only sign, sat on land with a ticking clock. 3 days later, an emergency HOA meeting was called. Attendance was mandatory for board members. Residents packed the clubhouse like it was a courtroom. Karen opened the meeting with forced composure. As many of you are aware, there has been confusion regarding the underlying land parcel. Confusion. That's one word for it. Then she did something smart. She avoided my name, but residents didn't. One stood up. Why didn't we know the land was leased? Another. Was this disclosed during home purchases? A third. Are our HOA dues funding a property we don't own? The tension in the room shifted. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about transparency. I hadn't planned on talking. But when multiple residents gestured toward me, Karen reluctantly allowed it. 5 minutes, she said tightly. I stood up calmly. I have no intention of disrupting this community. I purchased the parcel legally. The lease terms were recorded and accessible in public records. Murmurs. I've never denied access. I've never raised rates. I've never interfered with operations. More murmurs. But I was publicly accused of trespassing on my own land. Silence. Karen shifted in her seat. A retired attorney in the back asked, "What are the renewal terms?" I didn't hesitate. There are none. The room froze. It's at my discretion. You could feel the collective realization settling in. This wasn't about pride anymore. It was leverage. Here's where things got worse. The HOA's reserve study, which residents had just approved funding for, assumed 25 more years of clubhouse usage. But that assumption was built on automatic lease continuation, which didn't exist. Meaning, the financial planning of the HOA depended on an agreement that wasn't guaranteed. And Karen had just publicly antagonized the only person who could guarantee it. Then, unbelievably, her son stood up. "This is ridiculous. He can't just take our pool." The room collectively cringed. I responded evenly. "I haven't taken anything." "But you could." He wasn't wrong. That was the uncomfortable part. I could. I let the silence sit. Then I said something that changed the tone entirely. "I'm open to renewal." Heads turned instantly. But renewal requires mutual respect and formal negotiation, not police calls. The room shifted again. This was no longer confrontation. It was business. Board members started whispering among themselves because they understood something Karen didn't. If she handled this emotionally, she'd risk millions in property value. Homes in Silver Ridge marketed heavily on private lakefront clubhouse access. Take that away? Prices drop. Fast. And homeowners don't forgive leadership that tanks equity. After 2 hours of heated discussion, the board requested a private executive session. Residents waited outside. I stayed seated, calm, unbothered. When they returned, Karen looked smaller, less commanding. "We would like to schedule formal renewal discussions," she said carefully. "Not demand, not threaten, request. Tone matters." I agreed to meet in 2 weeks. Plenty of time, because negotiation power increases with time pressure, and they only had 11 months. Over the next week, something interesting happened. Residents began waving at me, smiling. One even stopped by my property with coffee. "Honestly," he said quietly, "we didn't even know about the lease. Thank you for being reasonable." Reasonable. That word spread faster than Karen's Facebook deletions. She tried to regain control, sent out emails emphasizing strong community leadership, scheduled a pool appreciation day, framed the situation as a minor paperwork misunderstanding. But people had read the documents. You can't unring that bell. Karen's authority was built on perception, confidence, control. But once residents realized the land wasn't owned, the lease wasn't guaranteed, the president escalated unnecessarily, her foundation cracked, because leadership without full information is just performance. 2 weeks later, I sent over a draft renewal proposal. Fair, not aggressive, but structured. 15-year renewal, market-adjusted lease rate, shared maintenance responsibility, formal dispute resolution clause, and one new addition, mutual conduct clause requiring respectful communication and verification prior to law enforcement involvement. In simple terms, no more dramatic police calls. Word reached me through a board member. She hated that clause, said it was insulting. But the rest of the board loved it, because it protected them too. Negotiation day arrived. Karen wore white, not casually white, power white. The kind people wear when they want to signal control. Her son sat behind her again, arms crossed, jaw tight, like this was some kind of family championship match. Across the table sat 3 board members, their attorney on speakerphone, and me. No drama, no raised voices, just paperwork. Because when emotion fails, contracts decide. Karen didn't start with appreciation. She started with accusation. You've put this entire community in an unstable position. I didn't react. No, I purchased property legally. The instability came from assumptions. The attorney cleared his throat gently. Let's focus on terms. Good man. My proposal was fair. Market-adjusted lease rate, slightly higher than their previous rate, which, frankly, had been underpriced for years. 15-year renewal, clear maintenance responsibilities, liability clarification, and the mutual conduct clause. That clause bothered her more than the money, because it symbolized something she couldn't stand: accountability. Halfway through the meeting, while the attorney discussed liability coverage, her son leaned forward. This is extortion. The room went silent. Board members stiffened. Even Karen turned slightly. I folded my hands calmly. Extortion requires coercion. I made no threats. I offered renewal. He opened his mouth again, but one board member cut him off. You're not on the board. Please refrain. That was the moment I knew. She had lost internal support. Because when your own board starts correcting your household, your influence is fading. The HOA attorney finally said what everyone needed to hear. Given the lease structure and expiration timeline, the association's best financial interest is cooperative renewal. Translation? You need him more than he needs you. That's not ego. That's leverage math. After 3 hours of back-and-forth adjustments, they called for a board vote. Karen voted no. 2 board members voted yes. The third hesitated, then voted yes. Motion passed. The lease would renew, with my conduct clause included, and market adjustment approved. Karen's face didn't explode in anger. It collapsed in quiet disbelief, because she had built her authority on dominance, and dominance doesn't survive transparency. The board chair turned to me. We appreciate your professionalism. That word again. Professionalism. Funny how far it gets you? Per HOA bylaws, major financial adjustments required a community vote ratification, which meant residents had to approve the new lease structure. Karen saw her last opportunity. If she could turn residents against me, she might regain control. Within days, flyers appeared on mailboxes. Protect our community. Emails framed the renewal as giving in to outside pressure. Outside. Interesting choice of word for the person who owns the ground beneath your clubhouse, but residents weren't uninformed anymore. They had read the lease, they had seen the police interaction, and most importantly, They had seen how calm I remained through all of it. The clubhouse was packed again, this time not with panic, with calculation. Karen spoke first. This agreement increases our dues obligations and sets a dangerous precedent. Then I spoke. No dues increase is required. The adjustment fits within your reserve allocation. I offered long-term stability. Without renewal, you face relocation or reconstruction costs exponentially higher. Murmurs filled the room. Because facts are heavy, and they land hard. A resident who worked in commercial real estate stood up. I reviewed the numbers. Without renewal, we're looking at millions in reconstruction or buyout costs. Another resident added, and declining home values. That sealed it. In HOA communities, equity talks louder than emotion. Ballots were cast, counted, recounted. Final result, 74% approved renewal. Karen's campaign failed, publicly, decisively. 2 days later, an email went out. Karen Whitmore was stepping down as HOA president to focus on personal priorities. Of course she was. Leadership built on control rarely survives exposure. Her son? I haven't seen him at the pool since. The first weekend after everything settled, I returned to the pool. No tension, no whispers, just families swimming, music playing, normalcy. A couple waved. One neighbor joked, "Glad we're officially swimming with permission." I smiled. It was always permitted. This story was never about a pool, or a spoiled son, or even Karen. It was about something simpler. Assumptions are dangerous. Silver Ridge assumed they owned everything inside their gates. Karen assumed authority extended as far as her confidence. Her son assumed loudness equals power. But ownership? Ownership doesn't shout. It's recorded, stamped, filed, quiet. I could have refused renewal entirely, doubled the rate, forced relocation, leveraged the embarrassment, but stability creates more value than revenge, and business beats ego every time. They needed the land. I wanted a reliable long-term tenant, simple alignment. Once emotion left the room, agreement was easy. The new HOA board implemented mandatory disclosure transparency for all residents, legal review before law enforcement involvement, clear separation between board authority and personal ego. Ironically, the community became stronger because power was finally balanced. The day Karen's son told me to leave his pool, he was standing on land his family didn't own, and he didn't even know it. Confidence without knowledge is fragile. Documentation isn't. If you ever find yourself being told, "You don't belong here," make sure the person saying it actually owns the ground they're standing on, because sometimes the quiet guy reading by the pool is the landlord.